Hey folks, Fishbat here, and this time I have got my Ogres back out of the cupboard, and they are going to be playing Ratkin this time. My Ogres have been out of it for quite a while, because I got some new Ogres, and found a better method of basing snow. I thought, well, if I'm going to do that, I might as well rebase all of the other Ogres. And after rebasing them, I found out that my method made the snow go yellow after a while, and so I had to rebase all of them again. So they were out of things for quite a while, but they're back now, and I'm glad to be playing them. So I've got 2,000 points of Ogres against Ratkin, and it's another loot scenario. Most of you may remember that the last loot scenario I played didn't go so well, but this time I'm playing the Ogres, and hopefully I will have learned from the lessons that you taught me. So, these are the notations I use. If you have a look, I'm going to use a new notation to keep track of loot markers over the course of the game. And let's have a look at this Ratkin army that I'm going to play against. So, getting into it, we have a horde of shock troops up the back there, a regiment of tunnel slaves up the front, with a swarm crier beside them with the warbow of Kava. The tunnel slaves are an excellent unit. They are about 60 points for, I think it's 14-16 nerve, and it's only defense 2, but 14-16 nerve means they can take a surprising amount of damage and still stay up. They are the premier chaff in King's War as far as I'm concerned. Very good chaff. Moving along, there's a weapons team with the Piercing 1 upgrade. I think it's called like Storm of Lead. The Light Horde with Fire Oil. They've got Stealthy, those guys, so you can't shoot them very easily. They've also got Ensnare. They are a bit tricky to approach. There is an Assassin, which in this photo it's already moved forward because it has a Vanguard move. And the Assassin in this game has the Wings of Honey Maze. A Shock Troops Horde up the back there again. A Warlock right in the middle of the picture, and he has a lot of spells: Heal 3, Bane Chant 3, Lightning Bolt 5, and Inspiring Talisman, so he's well kitted out. In front of the Shock Troops Horde there is another Tunnel Slaves regiment. Moving along in the forest we have 2 Death Engines, both of them with Vile Sorcery, which for 40 points is an exquisite shooting upgrade, and is practically mandatory on these things. For those who don't know, it's, I think, D6 plus 7 piercing 2 shooting attacks with 18-inch range. If you stay still, they hit on a 4+, so very effective shooting. And then on my opponent's left side of the board, my right, another Tunnel Slaves regiment next to a War Chief on Fleabag, who has the Blade of the Beast Slayer, and his horde of brutes. So that's the deployment there, and you can see that we have the loot tokens in red in front of his army. Quite a nicely based army there, nicely painted. That nice sort of green and off-white colour scheme. And now let's have a look at my Ogres. Not all of them painted, but worth a look anyway. So I've decided to go with a miniature version of what some are calling Storm Council, where you bring a whole bunch of Berserker regiments and then some Warlocks. So I've got 4 Berserker regiments here and 2 Warlocks. The reason that it's taken in this configuration is because Warlocks add an extra dice for their spells for every regiment or horde of Berserkers nearby. So these 2 Warlocks, 100 points each, will have Lightning Bolt 7, both of them, as long as they stay within 6 inches of both of those Berserker regiments. It is powerful. It only seems to get sickeningly disgusting when you take 3 or 4 of them or something like that for Warlocks. But after playing with this a few times, it just seems to me that it's very difficult to arrange the Berserkers so that they're going to be able to move easily and cover the approaches they need to respond to the enemy, and to be in range of the Warlock still. It is effective, but it's very tricky to pull off, and it takes a lot of real estate. It's a very wide formation. Like, it's nearly twice as wide as the Legion of Warriors, so you need to be very careful about using this. But anyway, that's what I'm doing. I'm using those Warlocks with all those Lightning Bolt spells. And past those regiments of Berserkers, we've got a Goblin Bigot on a Fleabag. And he's there basically to run around and be chaff. I know I poo-pooed him in the Ogre review video with direct misfire, but I've changed my tune. He is fantastic. What else have we got here? Up the back, an Ogre shooter horde with +1 to hit, surprising no one, because that unit is amazing. Another bigot on Fleabag near the forest there, just past the boomers. The boomers themselves with the extra piercing item, I think it's the Heartseeker chant, which is very, very effective on those guys, I have to say. A standard bearer to keep everyone inspired with the Breath 10, and a Siegebreaker horde with Headstrong, packing a lot of punch there. And then on my left flank, I've got 2 Red Goblin Blasters, a lot of explosive goodness just to prevent my opponent from waltzing up this side and flanking me. And that's the deployment of the entire board you can see there. So I'm clearly going to concentrate on the center and right loot tokens, and I've left one mostly to my opponent, and hoping to just blow him to bits with the blasters first. So let's get right into it. Ratkin turn 1. Everything begins to move straight up on his left side. In the center, it's a similar story. His assassin, however, makes a very cautious move. That's the one in front of the tower, the single-based one. He can fly, but he's made a small move up rather than a dramatic fly straight in. I think he's preparing to go into the boomers next turn. On the right side of the board, the Death Engines don't want to be within line of sight of my Ogre shooters, and if they get all the way out of the forest, then there'll be a house, not the picture, that will be between them and the shooter horde. So they're trying to get out of the way so as not to be shot, because they are definitely the juiciest target for my shooters. Otherwise, the slaves advance the double, the brutes move at their own pace, and the warlord, the war chief, moves up slowly. The Swarm Crier with the Warbow of Kaba shoots a single shot at one of the Goblin Blasters, but he misses. This will become a trend. The Warlock, on the other hand, shoots Lightning Bolt at my Ogre Boomers and does 2 points of damage. And that's the state of the board at the end of the Rat's first turn. Ogre's first turn. So quite a lot of things going on here. I move up my big Storm Council with the Berserker Regiments and the Warlocks. The Warlocks shoot 14 Lightning Bolts at the first Death Engine, and I think they put in between them 2 points of damage, so not very impressive. However, my shooters still have line of sight to it, and even with cover, they're hitting on 5s, and they do another 6 damage, so 8 points of damage total for that Death Engine. However, its nerve is unwavering and 18 to break, so I didn't get him this turn. In the center, I advance with everything. I swing my Goblin Bigot around to protect my Standard Bearer from a charge, or protect my Boomers from a charge rather. 11 breath attack into those slaves. Sorry, 11 damage that the slaves take, and they only waver. So this is what I mean. Most other chaff in the game, so like the Undead Ghouls, for example, they take 2 or 3 damage and they're gone, whereas these rats, they can take a lot of damage and still be there. So these guys are wavering. And on the left side of the board, I move my Boomers up. I'm keeping the right one back just a little bit so he's out of range of that breath weapon next turn, while still being sort of threatening. Ratkin turn 2. So, the Army Standard Bearer takes another shot at the Blaster, does nothing. Shock Troops move ahead, and the Blight and the... I forget what you call it, the Breath Attack Weapon War Machine. Weapons Team, that's what it's called. The Weapons Team moves ahead as well. As well as that, the Rat Slaves move and charge my Goblin Blaster and do no points of damage.
Oi! I didn't see a yellow belly roll there.
Who are you? What are you doing on my video?
I is the ref. I'm keeping an eye on this game to make sure you're playing by the rules.
Oh, that's quite helpful actually. Alright, you can stay, but only if you promise not to eat the biscuits.
I promise nothing.
Moving over to the center of the board, The assassin charges into the boomers, do 5 points of damage, and on the nerve roll, they are wiped out. However, they are inspired, and the inspiring is what saves them, which is very lucky. My bigot gets shot by the lightning bolt from the warlock. However, he survives all of it, not a scratch. Otherwise, the slaves who are wavered, they stay put, and the shock troops behind them move up. On the right side of the board, the death engines advance. Well, one of the death engines advance, the other one stays still, and they both fire on one of the warlocks. They get 8 points of damage between them and evaporate him off the board. The unit of brutes advances, and I think the corner of them gets on top of that loot token, and they now have it. I didn't realise they had it at the time. I don't know, but anyway, they got that loot token, and they've got it pretty under control there. I'm not within charge range, and those slaves have charged my berserker regiment and done no damage to them.
He did it again! He didn't make his yellow-bellied roll.
Ogre's turn 2. Lots of things going on here. So I countercharge the slaves, I get a flank charge on them with another regiment, I swing my warlock around to do 1 point of damage to the death engine, which holds, and I bring my other berserkers up to try and support. I move my red goblin bigot up in front of the ogre brutes, just in case I didn't break the slaves, because I didn't want my berserkers to get a flank charge, but in hindsight I should have left it, because it's in my interest to bring those berserkers closer to me so I can fight them and get that token. So that's how things look at the end of the turn on the right side. Moving along to the centre, at general advance, the siege breakers move up, and since they only move 5, and they're going to get charged by everything, I move the standard bearer in front of them as chaff. The standard bearer in turn uses his breath weapon to attack the warlock, who takes 3 points of damage. My boomers countercharge the assassin, do 6 points of damage and rout him, and then my bigot, just to hold things up, charges the front of that blood horde and does no points of damage. But he doesn't need to take damage, he's only there so that he can stop them from charging important things next turn. My shooters way up the back, they do 5 points of damage to the shock troops horde way up the back there. And that's the boomers without the assassin in front of them, which makes them happy. On my left side of the board, I keep one of my blasters in place in front of those slaves, but the other one advances right up next to those shock troops, but I don't explode him this turn. I figure that if I wait another turn, I'm going to get an even juicy one, and I might be even able to stop those shock troops from marching forwards if I can, if they won't be able to move ahead without going within an inch of that blaster. So, you know, it seems decent to me. If he shoots me, I'm just going to hurt those shock troops anyway, so win-win. Ratkin turn 3. So those slaves are no longer wavered, and they charge into the army standard bearer. The shock troops up the back, they advance as well, and they get on top of the loot token. And I didn't realise they'd done that either. I was paying attention to the positions of the units, not what they were doing, like, so I didn't realise he was on the loot token, which is quite important. Anyway, the Blight charge the Red Goblin Bigot, 8 damage, wipe him off the board. The Standard Bearer and the, weapons team advance, as does the Warlock. And then we have the Warlock and the weapons team putting 8 damage into my boomers, who are now on 13 damage total, and they rout well off the board. They're out of inspiring range, and so they're just gone. Over on the right side of the board, the 2 death engines focus fire on one of the berserker regiments, do 11 points of damage, and it is obliterated. The chief on Fleabag charges into the other regiment there and does a single point of damage. Not surprising, since he had to cover an obstacle. I don't think I marked it with an arrow, but those rat giants are backing away on this turn. Rat giants, what am I saying? They're rat ogres. No, they're not, they're brutes. Yes, they're called brutes in Kings of War. Those brutes are backing away. Over on the far left flank, The slaves charge back into the Red Goblin Blaster, and this time do 2 points of damage.
Oh, come on, that's the third time he's forgotten his yellow bellied roll.
Ogre's turn 3. So, I decide to move my Red Goblin Blaster right next to this very big pile of rats. And I think to myself, I wonder what's going to happen here. Kablooey! This was fantastic. So I get 9 points of damage on all 4 of those units, and had a 4-inch blast radius, except for the weapons team, which took 11 points of damage. So the standard bearer and the weapons team, they are just annihilated, and both of those hordes have 9 big fat damage sitting on them. So that was a marvellous explosion. Pretty good damage roll. My opponent had kind of ignored that boomer, the blaster rather, but that's the risk you take, because it can do things like that. So 65 points very well spent, I think you will agree. Over in the centre, I charge those slaves with my siege breakers, and they do a tremendous amount of damage and annihilate them. My standard bearer moves over to the side in front of those blight to prevent a charge on them next turn. Try a charge on the siege breakers from the blight. And then my shooters do 4 points of damage to the blight as well. Over on the right side of the board, my berserkers are getting a bit tripped up over themselves. Another problem with still running the Storm Council. But one of them countercharges into the Chieftain on Fleabag. The other 2 both advance. My surviving Warlock puts 2 points of damage on Death Engine. It's up to 11 now. I get a decent roll and it routs. My Bigot charges the surviving Death Engine, does a single point of damage, which is enough to disrupt it so it won't shoot next turn. And that's the state of things after it's all said and done on the right side of the board there. Ratkin, turn 4. So, his brutes begin to back off, and it's at this point the penny drops. I've been sort of doing okay in fights across the board, but at this point I go, oh no, he's going to move away and I can't catch him. And so I just facepalm at this point and think, okay, I can't catch those brutes at this point. He is too far ahead of me and he's got the same speed, so that loot token is just gone. I'm going to need to grab 1 more to draw, and I'm going to need to grab the other 2, both of them, in order to win. And when I look across the board, I see that the other 2 tokens are in Ratkin greasy paws. So I'm just thinking, oh no, I've been concentrating on the fights too much and not on the tokens, and I've stuffed this game up. So that's not good. What my opponent continues to do is his Death Engine rolls over onto my Bigot, does 8 points of damage, and crushes him flat. 3 points of damage to my Berserker Regiment from the Chief on Fleabag, total of 4, but he's okay. Over in the centre, my Army Standard Bearer is routed by those Blight, who do 15 points of damage. The Shock Troops in the centre, as I mentioned before, they've got one of those loot tokens and they are backing off. So they've got what they need, they're running away, and they are a bit too far away for me to grab them, and I'm thinking, oh dear, I've got to get through a lot of Blight, need to get through a Sorcerer to get them. Don't like the look of this. The Warlock does a Lightning Bolt attack on my Siege Breakers and do 2 points of damage. Over on the left, those slaves charge into my Blaster on the side, do 1 point of damage, and actually manage to rout it. So it explodes and does a mere 3 points of damage to them, and so they turn around and advance. You can see the Shock Troops up there on the top, they've got the last loot token as well.
Oi, Fishbat, I was just wondering, did he happen to make a yellow-bellied roll before he made that charge?
No, he didn't.
If he makes one more mistake, one more, I'm gonna disqualify him.
And this is the state of the board at the end of the Rat's 4th turn. So it's really getting to the pointy end of the game now. You can see we've both lost a lot of stuff, but he's got all of the loot tokens, and I'm sweating bullets at this point. Now, here's another one of those points. Have a look at the game board and see if you can pick what's going to happen. Keeping in mind that out of photo shot on the left-hand side is my opponent's slave regiment, which survives. Also keep in mind that my opponent keeps his dead stuff on the board up right on the edge of his side in the corner. So if you see stuff that I killed in the corner of his side of the board, it's not really there, it's just being held for somewhere to put it. But yeah, have a look at this. How do you think this is going to go down? Done? Alright, let's keep going. Ogre's turn 4. So, my Berserker's countercharge against the Chief, do 2 points of damage. He's on 7 now, but I still don't crack him. I put both of my Berserkers up because I figure, hey, he might forget to move them next turn. If he does, I want to be there to catch him. My Warlock shoots Lightning Bolt 6 at the shock troops over at the back there, do 3 points of damage. They're now sitting on 8. Over on the left-hand side, I do 9 points of damage by shooting to that shock trooper horde for a total of 18, which is a really big roll, and I rout them. So that was just a wonder shot from those Ogre shooters. Now, their reputation for effectiveness is very well deserved. They are phenomenal. So that's 1 loot token which my opponent's got dropped now. So he's 2-0 rather than 3-0. Oh, well, I forgot to mention, you can probably tell in this slide that my Siege Breakers charged into the Blight and beat them up. I must have just forgotten to write the details on the slide there. But that's what happened. The Siege Breakers charged forward and made mincemeat of the Blight. Ratkin turn 5. The Death Engine and the War Chief combi charge one of my Berserker regiments. They only do 7 damage between them, and it's not enough. They hold. Over in the centre, shock troops retreat 3 inches to get more distance. The Warlock runs back and heals them for 2 points. So they're down to, I think, 6 damage from 8. Which is frustrating because I want them to be as on high damage as possible so that I can even this out. The slaves on the left hand side, they are dashing forwards so that they can try and grab that loot token. The brute horde on the right side of the table with the loot token, they escape off the table on this turn as well. So my opponent has got definitely 1 token. Ogre's turn 5. I countercharge and flank that Death Engine and do a bajillion damage to it, ripped to bits. The other Berserker regiment charges into the, what do you call them? Chief on Fleabag. Sorry I'm forgetting these names. This is the first time I've done a report on the Ratkin. Anyway, so I charge into the Chief with the Fleabag, do 2 points of damage, is on a total of 9, and he routs as well. So I'm grateful for that. I've at least cleared up this side of the board, but that's not going to help me win at all. And that's how things look after it's all cleared. In the centre, I had a very hard decision to make. I had 2 tokens which are in play and which are viable. With my shooters, I was in range of shooting those shock troops this turn, and I could have put a lot of damage on them. However, when I measured the angle with the shooters before they moved, it was possible for that slave regiment to pick up the loot token and not be within range if they only stood on the very tip. And I thought, well, I need to be able to cover that loot token or else they'll survive and they'll definitely get the second one. So I figured that if I moved the shooters forward, they would be able to shoot the slaves next turn, and the Siege Breakers would just have to be able to do all of the work next turn. So at this point, I'm really depending on a turn 7 to be able to do everything that I need to do. Because the Siege Breakers there probably won't be able to make it next turn, especially if the Warlock gets in the way. So I need 1 turn to break the Warlock, another turn to break those Stormtroops. Ratkin turn 6. On the left hand side, the slaves grab the loot token. His Warlock advances just in front of my siege breakers to stop them from advancing and charging his unit of shock troops. Shock troops back up as well, and that backup this turn was enough to stop my berserkers from being in charge range. So that's annoying, but what are you going to do? My opponent is playing well. Ogres turn 6. Big turn. My shooters put 6 points of damage into those slaves and rout them. Okay, so my opponent has dropped that token again. He's got one confirmed and he's still holding another, which I might be able to get. My siege breakers charge into the warlock. Oh, sorry, before we get to there, my own warlock, the Ogre warlock, shoots lightning bolt into the shock troops again, only gets 1 point of damage though, so they're up to 7. And the siege breakers, as you would imagine, crush the warlock beneath their feet. So, now we need to roll for turn 7. Come on, 4+. Yeah, we get turn 7. Okay, good, good. I might be able to make this a draw. Let's see if I can do this. So, siege breakers charge in, and they get 10 points of damage. Not a bad roll. So they're on 16 total. I work this out. On 2d6, I need to roll a 6, and I'll get the draw. Okay, I'm sweating bullets. I might be able to get a draw out of this. So, I get the dice ready. I throw, and 4. Those shock troops hold, they're fine. Okay. And my opponent has 2 loot tokens at the end of the game. So, and 2 mine none. So, well done to my opponent. A very good game.
Hold on. Something seems a bit funny with that Ratkin list. Let me just have a little bit of a look around here. This one, that one, that one over there. Yeah, get all them ones as well. That's that one. Oh, right over there. Wait a minute. Wait. 2,020 points? What? That is the last straw. For 4 counts of failure to make a yellow-bellied roll. For 1 count of exceeding the points limit of a game by 20 points. And, most egregiously of all, failure to bribe the ref. Your opponent is hereby disqualified.
Silly goblin. You don't disqualify people for an honest mistake. Especially if it's going 1% over the points limit and forgetting a very easily forgettable rule. This is not the World Championship title, you stupid goblin. Anyway, my opponent's a perfectly honest chap. The entire game, he was reminding me that I had the brutal special rule on my units, which I always forget. Anyway, my opponent definitely outplayed me in this one, focusing on the mission and not on the battle, as I was. So, big thanks to my opponent for the game. I hope you all enjoyed watching it, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!
Oh, look! Way back then he forgot his yellow-bellied roll here as well. I nearly missed that one.